Right. Well, it's 7:05. Um, I'm going to go ahead and get started, guys. Those of you that are on, welcome to our second virtual Pint Night. The Georgia BHA chapter is really excited to do these. I wish we could do some things in person. We do have some things lined up, not only with more virtual Pint Nights, but also some options with some in person events. We've got a film festival that we're working on that's about duck hunting that's going to be happening on April 24th in Alpharetta. So keep an eye out on your emails for that. We'll be posting that on social media and as well as getting that listed up on the BHA national page as well. So there'll be the BHA national social media will also be advertising that too. So again, just keep an eye out for that. Um, this Pint Night, of course, is sponsored by the Georgia chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, as well as Bear Hunting Magazine. We reached out to them, and they were gracious enough to donate some gear that we're going to give away as door prizes. If anybody that wasn't listening just a few minutes ago during this event, while somebody's talking, I'm going to run a few random number generators and pick probably 7 folks out of the list to receive some prizes. And I will give you an email address. We could just use the same email address for this event, the bears at bhageorgia.org. That's ORG, not .com, it's .org. We had a little confusion with that with our last Pint Night for the giveaways, but got it squared away anyway. If you could, if everybody that is not a presenter, so like me and Chris and Dylan and Steven, we'll stay unmuted throughout this process so that we can keep our guys central on the screen for everybody. If everybody else could stay muted, we're gonna. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat. But we do have a ton of questions for these guys already. That's probably going to answer just about any question that anybody would have and related to bear hunting. So with that in mind, again, just welcome everybody. Cheers to being here. And we're really excited for this. I know I'm super duper excited. I've been spending 2 seasons bear hunting, and I'm striking out right now. So I'm really excited to learn some tips and tricks and tactics from these guys that clearly know what they're doing. So we're going to start off right now with a real quick word from our current chair. This is Dr. Christopher Jenkins, and take it away, boss.
Thank you, Mark. First of all, I'd like to just kind of reiterate what Mark was saying and welcome everybody to the Georgia Bear Hunting Virtual Pint Night. I think it's going to be a fun night. I founded the chapter. I've been working on Georgia BHA issues now for many years and recently founded this chapter with a number of other people on the call. I will say that last week, I was voted by the North American Board of BHA to go up and serve at the North American level. So I am stepping down as the Georgia chair, and I'll talk about that transition here in just a second. But for those of you that don't know much about backcountry hunters and anglers, you could think of us as a voice for public land and water. Our mission is all centered around access and opportunity on public land and public water across the country, across North America. And just to give you some examples of the types of things we're doing in Georgia, we work, for example, with the U.S. Forest Service, trying to get more active management, say prescribed fire, more forestry activities on the national forest, which provides more access and opportunity for those of us hunting a number of species. We are working on some land sale issues news at the moment. You may have seen some things around the Boggs Mountain project. We're looking into a new issue with this Ocmulgee National Park, and we're going to be working to try to ensure that those hunting opportunities on those existing public lands don't somehow get lost if we do create a large national park here in the state. So those are the types of things we do here at a state level. As an example, I'd encourage everybody to get involved. I'd encourage everybody to become a member if you're not, and pursue opportunities within the state. We're developing state captain networks and people to help hold events. And Mark will probably talk about that a little bit later when he talks about membership. So I'm excited for this event. I live in the Georgia mountains. And I hunt quite a bit. And it was not until, I mean, I've hunted bears, I guess you could say, for years, but it was really more opportunistically when I was deer hunting. I get really fired up about hunting kind of big woods whitetails in the Appalachians, and you know, I certainly would shoot bear, but I wasn't hunting for them. If one happened to walk by, I'd shoot it, kind of thing. So I'm excited to learn more. Last couple of years I've been a little more focused on it and continue you know, to have that interest. So before we get on to our two guest experts, I just want to pass it on to the incoming Georgia BHA chairman as I move on to the North American board. Nathan Henderson will be moving in. He's currently the vice chair. He'll be moving into the chair position, and you know, and just let him say a couple words. So go ahead, Nathan, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Hate to see you go, but really proud of that you're on the North American board, and we have a Georgia voice on the North American board. I think it's going to be really great. But yeah, no, I'm definitely excited about becoming the chair of the Georgia chapter and what we can do in the state and how we can help with public land issues, land and water, fishing, hunting issues. I mean, we're not just going to work on public land. I mean, that's going to be our main focus, but we're also going to work on all hunting and fishing access issues and hunting issues that come up. So, you know, if you're, I'll reiterate what these guys have said. If you're not a member yet, please consider becoming one. And thank you all for coming, joining this. Really excited about this Pint night. I have also been on a couple of bear hunts unsuccessfully. So hopefully we can all learn a thing or two tonight. But yeah, so excited about the journey, excited about what we got going on in Georgia. I think it's going to be, I think we're going to have some really cool stuff coming as far as events go, like Mark was talking about. But excited for you guys to be here. Thanks, and become a member if you're not already. Thanks, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nate. I really appreciate that, and excited for you to take the helm. You're gonna be awesome. I know.
Some big shoes to fill, so it's gonna be tough.
That's true, but it'll be awesome. I'm really excited for it. So right now, to keep moving on, I'm just going to do a real brief introduction and then ask these guys to talk a little bit about themselves. Our two guest presenters are Stephen Patton and Dylan Harper. Stephen Patton grew up in the mountains, and he's been chasing bears for 28 years. When I asked him to give me a little information about himself, that's what he told me. So that's really all I needed to hear. It sounded like he's got his ducks in a row. And Dylan, he's been a hunter his entire life, Dylan Harper. And he's been fascinated by bears for the past 6 years and spent a lot of time in the mountains working on figuring them out. And he's been successful for the past 4 years and done very well with it. So Stephen, if you don't mind, take a second. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, just a brief description of how you got into bear hunting.
Okay, I live in Blairsville, Union County. Like you said, I've been here my whole life. I live on the same property my great-grandfather bought when he was a young man. When I coming up as a kid, we just hunted. I mean, that's just what we did. And bears was just another thing. Back then, though, it was rare to see a track of a bear, much less a real bear. And as the population grew, I don't know, it's a more of a challenge, I think, than any other kind of hunting that I'd done. So it's kind of naturally came to me is just, I love bear hunt. I don't know. It just, as y'all know, there's something about bears.
Awesome. Awesome. That's really exciting. All right. So Dylan, if you don't mind, take a few seconds and tell us about yourself, how you got into bear hunting. Just a brief description.
Okay. Well, Dad, he had me hunting from, I can't remember when. Grew up hunting whitetail in a hunting club. And as I got older, basically it came down to paying membership dues for a club. And by that time, you couldn't find a place that was under, $600-700 a year. And at that time, I couldn't pay for it. So I got into hunting in the public land. Wanted to go hiking one day with a friend. Dad dropped me off at a place that he said he used to hunt when he was dating my mother, actually. We went hunting in here. Actually, we were scouting it out, checking it out, and we ran into a sow with 2 cubs, probably 30 yards away, and she turned around and looked at us and kept on about her business, and we looked down below us. There was another sow with 2 cubs right below us, and ever since then, I wanted to hunt bear. We just went out and threw everything in the book at it till we could figure them out. And we pretty much got a good system now.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And you hunt bears not just in Georgia, you hunt up in Pennsylvania as well.
I have not been successful in Pennsylvania. It is a whole nother animal up here, starting from scratch.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. All right. So let's get into some of these questions. Stephen and Dylan, just feel free to hop in and start answering the questions as you wish. And we'd like to hear from maybe both of you for each one of these questions. If if one person answers the same way that you would, then feel free to say I agree or whatever. But have you guys noticed any long-term trends in the bear populations of North Georgia?
They say they are getting higher. And if you talk to any of the technicians at Chattahoochee WMA, they can give you a lot of information. They're saying that the problems that they encounter with relocating bears, especially around Helen, Cleveland, Blairsville, that they are begging people to come out and kill them just because they can't handle the workload anymore. There's so many relocation calls they have to do. But as far as prior to the past 5 years, I haven't been around long enough to tell you any long-term trends.
How about you, Stephen? Do you notice any trends in the bear population from North Georgia?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just if you just look at the harvest records, I mean, there's no doubt the population's been increasing for several years. It's noticeable too. I mean, you used to, instead of just hoping one comes by, you actually, got a chance of getting on some bears now.
Very cool. That's exciting to hear. I've seen some bears, but haven't been able to, like I said, haven't been able to make it happen. I've seen them more out of season than I have in seasons. But so when you guys are going out for a bear hunt, what's your primary strategy for locating where you need to hunt? Maybe to get into the range, to ethical kill range of a bear.
First thing we always look for is white oaks that are dropping acorns. That is going to be their number one food source they are looking for. And secondary would be red oaks. If you can find either of those two from September to late October, I mean, you just look for the sign. As long as there's sign there and there's still food there, they will continue to return until it's all gone.
Yeah, if you plan on doing any pre-season scouting, you need to be mass crop surveying. That's really all you need to be doing. You don't need to be looking for bear sun. Find white oak, the more the better. And every year the same tree is not going to produce, don't seem like, but keep a check on them. If you find big patches of white oaks, you want to check on them every year, probably maybe a couple times a year, especially if they have fruit on them. And then just like Dylan said, if you can't find white oaks, then a little while later, the reds will get ripe, and that's where they'll be.
Very cool. So acorns are the primary source for looking for them.
Yes.
Do you guys use any like e-scouting to identify areas to hunt? And if so, what type of areas or what type of features are you looking for?
Usually I'll just use Google Maps on the phone, go to a topographical setting. During the early season, I want to look for the higher ridge tops or any bench or shelf just below the ridge. And those are usually where the white oaks will be holding up the best. During the late season, I'll typically try to stick towards a water source, whether it be a spring head or a stream, usually a mid to higher elevation range. They like to hang out near the water.
Yeah, I don't do a whole lot of e-scouting. You know, if you're going to though, if you're going to look at something on a map or a GPS and then go look at it, you know, naturally, flat ridges are just easier to cover. You know, it's easier to walk a mile on a flat ridge top than it is up and down side hilling. So that's a start anyway.
All right. So you mentioned like certain landscape or topographic features, like so ridges, shelves near ridges. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I really wish I could take a screenshot of a map and send it to you and just show you with my finger what I'm looking at. But usually not the highest ridge, say like the Appalachian Trail. That's not the ridge I'm looking for. It's a lead ridge that comes down off of the high ridge. Anytime there's a shelf below one of those or just little nooks and crannies, I'd say 3/4 of the way up, you'll see where the slope of the mountain comes down and then it's not as steep anymore and it fingers out in different directions. Usually right where the steep part of the mountain comes to a lead ridge or any other type of elevation drop. That's what I'm looking for.
Dylan, is that due to where the acorn mass, the white oaks you're talking about in particular, that's where they're typically produced the best, or you just find that those stick around latest in the season, or what is it about those topographic features as it relates to food?
When it comes to the food, yes, that is what I'm looking for. The terrain doesn't necessarily mean that the food is there, but those are typically the types of areas that they like to bed. And you want to catch them between their bed and their food. So if you're able to go, say in August, right before the acorns start dropping, you want to scout out an area. You want to look for these types of terrain features, locate the trees, and then if the sign is there, you know, the bear is going to be bedded nearby somewhere.
You want me to ask a couple, Mark, while I'm going?
Yeah, I was going to ask Stephen if that's something similar that he looks for as well.
I don't look much for features. I'm looking for food wherever it may be.
Gotcha.
So along those lines, Stephen, so what's your recommendation for finding those food sources? Is that typically something you're doing pre-season? Is that just a ton of in-season scouting boot leather? You're just walking huge routes in the mountains, or how are you finding that, you know, that food source?
Yeah, a lot of hiking and, you know, with binoculars looking in the tops of those white oaks. You know, you can't see, or I can't see them good till later, like early August, maybe late July. Of course, anytime I'm out, you know, if I see a limb blowed out of a white oak, I go pick it up, see if there's anything on it. I'm always looking for stuff like that, but because the mass is going to be different every year. You just never know. You just got to go look and see. You're not going to know till it's time.
Yeah, I think that's a real hot tip for folks, and I do this with deer hunting in the mountains, but it would be similar for bears. Take binoculars on your summer hikes because that's the best time to find out, how your acorn mass is distributed, and just kind of search the high points of those trees and looking for acorns. I'll tell you a lot in terms of where to go a couple months later. So you both mentioned elevation in different ways. It sounds like, Stephen, you don't focus too much on topography or elevation. You're just focused on the food. I'm just curious, Dylan, why you say the lead ridge. For again with deer, those are often places I focus on as well. But what is it about the highest ridges we might have that you typically wouldn't spend as much time on? Is it again back to the bedding, or is it something else?
Typically the way that we hunt, just our style of hunting, we have two people and we'll park a car at the top of a ridge somewhere, say the Appalachian Trail, and then we'll have a car parked at the bottom a couple miles away. And what we'll do is we'll follow the thermals. Basically, when the sun heats up the ground in the morning, the wind blows uphill for most of the day. So we'll be starting from the top, and then we'll be just meandering down through all the little nooks and crannies and those higher ridges that spur off of the main ridge line is usually where we see a bear at.
Gotcha. Two more questions, and I'll turn it back over to Mark. So, so you've both talked about acorn mass, and you've talked a little bit about those preferred, white oak being the primary, red oak being secondary, and obviously there's other masts in the forest, but those are the top ones. So what if you're walking into like a really heavily producing oak stand, but you're not seeing bear sign? Are you still hunting that, or are there particular types of sign that you're looking for in these feeding areas? And if so, what would those sign? What would the sign be?
So if you see an area and it's full of white oaks, and you walk in there and there's acorns there, but there's no bear sign, I'm gonna look at it every 3 days until there's bear sign there.
And when you say bear sign, what is that, Stephen, to you?
It's the way it depends. So early, they're going to climb those white oaks and they're going to rip the limbs out of it and all that. That's easy sign to see, early before they once they start dropping, the ground just be chewed up. If there's scat there, great. If not, I don't sweat it too much. You can just tell, if the bear has to spend a little bit of time somewhere to make sign. They're pad footed, so they walk across the ground, you may not even know it. But if they're there long enough, it's going to be chewed up, trampled down, matted down where they're laying around. You'll be able to recognize it if there's a lot of it, for sure.
How about you, Dylan? Is there certain types of sign that you're keying in on, and will you hunt good food sources if there's no sign, or are you moving on?
Typically, the way we stage our vehicles, we've got so much ground to cover that we're not going to stick to one specific spot if we don't see anything. However, if you come to, like he said, a white oak and you just see branches all over the ground, the leaves are still fresh and green. A lot of times I'll actually see trails, and the way these bear trails look, it looks almost as if they match their steps. They'll step in the same spot every time, like a cat will. And you'll just see little depressions in the ground with each footstep. And if I ever find anything like that, usually I'll try to back out of the area, especially if the wind is really bad. And I'll return probably around 3 o'clock. And if they're not coming out by 5 or 6 o'clock, usually I don't see them there.
And so it
those
sounds
are-
like Dylan, my last question before I turn it over to Mark was I was going to ask about how active you guys are when you hunt. So, and it sounds like Dylan, for you're primarily mobile. You guys are moving through the mountains, and you talked about how you use the thermals, to your advantage in doing that. So you're moving, but in some cases, if you find extremely hot sign, you'll set up on that. How about you, Stephen? Are you moving most of the time you're bear hunting, or if you find a spot with a really good sign, are you setting up a stand or a blind or sitting, or you just always move through the woods?
Well, if a lot of moving for sure, but I do like sitting on hot sign if there's, if there's a lot of it and it's hot, I love sitting on it, and I'll even carry a stand in if it's feasible. If it's not, it doesn't matter to sit on the ground. That shouldn't bother you. But being in a tree helps a little bit with the scent and all. But
And
finding that something to sit on, though, you're gonna do a lot of walking more than likely.
so I'm bear hunted quite a bit, and I'll end up seeing a fair amount of old bear sign. So this is a question to both of you, and then Mark, take it away. But what's how old of sign is bad sign that you wouldn't even take notice of and you just kind of move on? Does a bear need to have been there in the last day or two, last week or two? How do you guys think about that?
Not necessarily. I have checked out spots in September before bow season even opened just to find the white oaks. And I've came back during muzzleloader or even open weekend of rifle season. A lot of the limbs that have been ripped out, the leaves have turned brown. The poop is, if it's fresh, it looks a lot like peanut butter. As it gets older, it'll turn black hard. If there's still food there, that bear is still going to return until every last bit of it is gone before he moves over to a new spot, unless somebody has pushed him out of the area.
If I can find, if it has old sign and fresh sign, then I feel like that's good. If it's all old, I don't stay. It's got to be something pretty fresh before I want to sit on it.
Do you guys find that that the bears will move from specific areas during one part of the season versus another part of the season? I know just from some tips that other people have given me that early season is better for bear hunting than later during the season, primarily because of the acorn mast. But do you find that bears move from, like, whether it be elevation or terrain features, or do they just follow the food?
I think it's just the food. Early they're in hyperphagia, they're eating, I don't know, a lot. The fatter they get, the less they move. And I think that's why you see less later. It doesn't mean it's not good bear hunting later. It's just that early season, they're really moving a lot.
Cool. What's a bear's typical daily range? Like, do they travel, miles, or, do they kind of stick to an area? How's that work?
It's a little harder for me to answer that now down in Georgia. They typically, we found them bedded less than 200 yards from where all their sign was, from where they were eating. They'll hang out and just keep eating in the same spot until it's all gone. Up here in PA, it's a little different because you have a lot of agriculture throughout the state forest land. You got cornfields and soybeans. They do prefer these type of crops over acorns sometimes, so it's really hard to figure out where they're moving and how long they've been walking, because you'll be out 3 miles in the woods to a fresh pile of poop that's full of soybeans. You look at your satellite map looking for farmland, and there's nothing for 4 or 5 miles. But for Georgia specifically, I don't think they really move that far.
Yeah, I think Dylan's exactly right. about that. There is a little bit of agriculture, and I've been found scat that was nothing but corn. And like you said, you look on your GPS or whatever, and the nearest field is at least a couple miles away. So, in the mountains, if there's enough food in the mountains, I don't think they're ranging big. If the mast is scarce, I think they're ranging really big.
All right. So if stepping away from the food side, is there like a key habitat feature that you look for bears specifically?
Typically they'll bed in the mountain laurel or on a steep side hill. Other than that, not really. Because
they
when
like
they're
it.
moving and they're feeding, they can pop out anywhere, wherever the food is.
Yeah, they like it quiet and they're shy. So if there's food in a laurel thicket, that's probably where they're going to be.
Gotcha. So let's say you found the food, you found the sign, and you're confident that you're going to run into a bear. How do you judge? And we'll stick with Georgia bears. How do you judge the size and sex of a bear when you do see one?
That's a tough one. I honestly can't answer on how to judge the size. It is really hard to tell sometimes, especially if you're hunting without a scope or if you're bow hunting. A lot of times they'll be in the tops of trees and the canopy would be so thick that all you see is just a little black spot through the green, and you have to wait till it comes down to see him. But as far as telling a male from a female, I really can't tell.
But and just so everybody knows, the weight thing is important, as a lot of you probably know, because there is a minimum. A bear has to be a certain size before you can legally harvest it in Georgia.
Yes.
But it's got to be a really small bear to be illegal. There you go. Somebody just typed in.
Yeah,
75.
somebody just said 75 pounds was the minimum weight.
Yeah. So if you see a solo bear, more than likely, not guaranteed, but more than likely, it's going to be a 2-year-old juvenile that will be way over 75 pounds. It should be in the 100 to 150 pound range. Now, if you see a group of bears, even though they all look the same size, that might require a little more attention, to try to figure it out. It is hard to judge them, but again, that solo bear more than likely is going to be good and legal. Now, and that's up to you whether you want to shoot it or not.
Sure. All right. So, what would you say? We'll get into like the types of hunting here in just a minute, but like as far as like when you're carrying your stuff into the woods, like what would you say is your most critical gear? Like maybe your top 3 or top 4 items of gear that you take into the woods when you're bear hunting.
Keep it simple. If you're going to kill a bear out in the mountains, you're not going to want to drag it out. You're going to want a sharp knife, and let's say a headlamp would be another good one. A regular handheld flashlight, it's up to your personal preference. I prefer a headlamp because most of the time, if you're going to shoot something later in the evening, it's going to be dark before you're done preparing it. So a good knife, headlamp, backpack is probably number 1 for me. I don't like dragging, especially bears. It's really difficult, especially if you're by yourself. So I always plan on packing them out. And not a GPS, but a compass. It's always good to have a compass on you, especially when you're going a couple miles in, and that'll really help keep you going in the right direction if you have a planned route. A lot of times you'll lose cell phone service, and you're using an Onyx map or a Google map. It'll show you your pinpoint. You can see where you're at on the map, but a lot of times you won't know which direction you're going unless you have a very obvious terrain feature that you're following.
Yeah, I totally agree with Dylan. No, I'm not a gear guy. I don't get too hung up on all the gadgets. If I was gonna pick my most important piece, it would be my shoes. Other than that,
So what type of boots do you guys wear? Just out of curiosity, even if you don't have to give like brand names, but is it a certain style boot? Like
Hiking boots.
hiking boots, regular like mountain boots. You're not wearing rubber boots on these 3 mile mountain treks. So,
Absolutely not.
Very cool. We might have lost Steven. His video screen went black, and we might have lost him. So we'll give him a second to come back up. But in the meantime, Dylan, or both of you guys, if Steven, if you're still there, what weapons do you guys use to hunt bears? Do you participate in all the seasons like bow, muzzleloader, and rifle, or do you prefer a specific weapon?
Bow season would be the best season to hunt bear because that's just right in the prime time of the acorn crop for the white oaks. However, the rifle is obviously more firepower. I prefer to have a more powerful weapon. There's just less chance for an injured animal. I think it's a more ethical kill. I would prefer a rifle over a bow, but I do hunt with both. Muzzleloader, I've been getting a little better with it over the years. Starting out, I had a lot of complications with it, especially going out in the rain. I did come in contact with a bear, and when I pulled the trigger, it sounded like a 22. I guess the powder got wet or something. If you're going to muzzleloader hunt, obviously you got to make sure everything is good to go.
We had a couple questions in the chat about bow hunting. Do you recommend a specific poundage or any specific types of broadheads or anything like that?
No, not really. I'm not the most knowledgeable person to ask about bow hunting. I'll just be completely honest with you. I shoot a redhead bow. It's a Bass Pro Special from probably 10 or 12 years ago. It's the same bow I hunted with when I was, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 years old, maybe a little older than that. But as long as you're putting the arrow where it's supposed to go, it'll do its job. I've used cheap ram cats most of the time. They've always worked.
hey, Dylan, while we're still waiting for Steven, I have a follow-up question to something you said earlier, if you don't mind, Mark. You mentioned bears in trees, and we've talked about it, and I've seen a lot of bears feeding up in trees. How often when you're out hunting, how often, would you say you see the bear in the tree versus on the ground? And if they are in the tree, you mentioned waiting for them to come down, but if they're in the tree, do you have particular strategies for hunting them that might be different?
Yes and no. I'd say about 50% of the time, I hear a bear before I see it. And we learned last year that it sounds like a dog chewing on a bone when they're trying to chew through a tree branch. And we'll see the acorns falling out of the tree and the bark and the limbs and everything. Whenever they are occupied, it seems like all of their attention is just focused on food. So their other senses are more vulnerable, I guess. The only thing that you'll never be able to outsmart is their nose. You have to make sure that your wind is always going the direction you want it to go. If it's swirling around all over the place and you're in close proximity, you've got a limited amount of time to pull it off. You go up to a tree. If you're bow hunting, you have to get pretty close. Sometimes it's difficult to see them, to judge, what they are, how big they are because of the canopy. So it's just all comes down to luck at that point, whether you get winded or not.
Great. Looks like Steven's back. Can you hear us, Steven?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Go ahead, Mark. You want to keep going or you want me to go? You're muted.
Sorry about that, guys. Stephen, I was just going to ask you, in some of the pictures that you sent to me, I was really impressed with the longbow. I think you might have missed the question about the poundage for bow hunting, but I know I hunt with a longbow occasionally as well. But in regards to bow hunting, what would you say is like the most important part of the bow hunting side? Would you say is it arrow placement, broadhead style, how close you can get? What would you say is that?
Yeah, shot placement for sure. You know, any equipment adequate for deer more than likely is going to be good for bear. Personally, I have to be pretty close because I'm hunting with a longbow and I'm poor shot, so I like to be close. And bears are a little bit tricky to shoot with a bow. There's not a lot of definition in the side of a bear, on the profile of a bear, and they can be doing all kinds of crazy stuff. They can be curled or leg back, and you don't see it. It's a little tricky, but you know, there's a thing goes around says shoot middle of the bear. I'm not sure that that's what I practice, but I think that's probably decent advice. And then,
You're saying center mass or the exact
Yeah.
middle. So I know the kill zone is slightly different on a bear than a deer. Do you guys? Could you guys explain that difference a little bit?
I think their lungs are a lot bigger.
Yeah, and they seem to be a little further back too than deer. So I don't think you necessarily need to hug the leg by no means. Of course, as far as that goes, I'd way rather shoot one in the gut than to shoot it in the shoulder for sure. You know, a gut shot bear usually can recover, gut shot bear, but not a shoulder shot. You ain't gonna get it.
That's really interesting. Really interesting. So moving on to the rifle side, what would you say is like the best caliber for a rifle?
That all comes down to personal preference, really. Whatever you're good with is what you should take. People tell me all the time they kill them with 243s, and I'd say that'd be a good minimum to start with. Personally, I use a 308. I have a short compact rifle. It's an ultralight. The 308 seems to lose the least amount of muzzle velocity whenever you chop the barrel down really short. So that's just what I use. When it comes to your big, your magnums, you're hunting at close range. There's really no need to have a magnum rifle. One, it's going to be heavier. You're going to have to tote it all over the place with you. And if you're at close range, a lot of times the hide on the opposite end, the exit side, your fur will be blown. You'll have a softball size hole coming out of the other side. Usually short action, medium size. If it'll kill a deer, it'll kill a bear.
Steve,
Yeah,
do you hunt with a rifle much? Sorry, go
No.
ahead.
I'm not a good one to ask about that part. I don't do that very often, but I'd say Dylan's right on though. I mean, I guess the best gun would be one you can shoot well. Bears just they don't bleed well. They're hard to recover if they get out of sight after the shot. So you make that good shot, he's not going to go out of sight. So that's the most important, I think.
Very cool. All right. So we've gotten kind of into the weapons and calibers and bows and everything. You mentioned that you're never going to outsmart a bear's sense of smell. How is his hearing and his eyesight?
His eyesight and hearing, they say it's comparable to a human's. there's a lot of times, I don't even wear camouflage. I'll have just a green pair of hiking pants on and a cotton t-shirt, maybe a little mossy oak, whatever. I'll cut off the sleeves just because it's 85 degrees whenever you're hunting this time of year. Um, as long as you're not moving erratically and you're being stealthy, most of the time they don't see you. And a lot of times the bears that you see are within bow range and they'll walk right past you and not know that you're there. If they're occupied feeding, as I said earlier, their focus is on eating. So they'll be less likely to look over at you, if you're doing your part. But the nose, you'll never be able to outsmart the nose.
Yeah, I agree. They can see and hear just fine. They're way more out to smell you though, and they're not like deer, and that's what we're used to. Most of us are used to hunting. They're not spooky like deer. They're just, I don't know. They're just not that spooky. If they smell you, for sure they're gone. But if they look at you, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to spook them that bad till they smell you, and then they're gone.
Gotcha. When you guys are hunting, do you guys use any like auxiliary attractants like calls or scents or anything like that?
No.
I have called in a couple of predator calls. That's pretty cool. I think it's probably worth carrying one with you, especially if you see a bear at 100 yards. If you don't think it's going to come by, I mean, it don't hurt to blow something at it, see if it'll react. In my experience, they usually do.
Very cool. Chris, you want to ask a few questions? You're muted. There you go.
Sure. So one question I kind of want to go back to a little bit that I've been thinking about, and then we'll keep moving forward. So both of you talked about bedding and some of the places they like to bed. You've also, Stephen, you just talked about their activity, or not know if activity is the right word, but that they're less as compared to a deer. They might actually look at you if they see you or hear you, as opposed to run immediately. And it seems to me, having deer hunted and bear hunted a fair amount in the mountains, that, I will see bears, say, active a higher proportion of the time during the day than, say, a deer. And do you have any ideas on just daily activity patterns? Are you more, and what I'm seeing, is that real? Are you more likely to see a bear out in the middle of the day just kind of bumbling along versus a deer, which may kind of somewhat regularly, say, bed down through the middle part of the day?
Yeah, so early, I mean, they're just trying to put on fat, so they're moving more, I think, than they do any other time of year. That early fall, I think they're moving the most. And yeah, I mean, you see them all times of the day, especially in the mountains. Again, it's just about the food. They're just feeding.
Agree, Dylan. So, okay, so you guys, you talked about where to shoot a bear on its body. You talked about the weapons that you use. So let's say, you've hit one, you've knocked it down, and you're going to recover it. So the first thing I'd like to hear a little bit more about, I think Stephen, you mentioned, or maybe Dylan, you did, that they don't bleed much. And so could you expand on that a little bit? Is that always the case? And why you think that might be?
From what I've heard, it's because of their body fat. Their skin really isn't all that thick, but when they've been putting on a lot of weight, a lot of times, if you don't have a very big wound, or at least an exit wound, the fat under their skin will close back up, and it'll prevent a lot of the blood from hitting the ground. And that's all I know.
Yeah, just just in my experience, if you shoot a bear and you blood trail it for much over a couple of 100 yards, your chances of recovering it are slim. You're going to run out of a blood trail eventually. I mean, if it goes 200 yards, that's a long bear blood trail. But if you shoot that bear good, if you take out both lungs, he's not even going to go out of sight. You're not going to have to worry about it.
Mhm.
In my experience, rarely have I recovered a bear after tracking it over 100 yards.
So I have a question about, so you find the bear and you shoot it. And this comes from a story. I shot a bear once here in Rabun County, quartering away, and I shot it through the gut up into the chest cavity. And I came up on the bear and it was laying down on its side, but it was clearly not expired. And you know, it was just kind of there. It was huffing, kind of sitting there looking at me. You know, so bears, as you know, are one of these animals. There are a number of them in the wild that kind of like, I don't know if fear is the right word, but you know, this is a question people might have. If you come up on a wounded bear, you know, how likely, you know, is the bear typically going to try to say go the other direction from you? Is it going to, you know, come at you like, you know, a hog might do, for example? I've had that happen a couple times. Or how do you deal with wounded bears that you need to go finish off?
One that we came across in the past uh, was bedded down below a log, and we had actually lost the blood trail. We were just taking random guesses, just walking in different directions. We all split up, and I came across it. Um, when I saw it, we both made eye contact immediately. Uh, he didn't try to charge. He got up. He didn't run. I think he had bled out enough. He was exhausted enough from running that he just didn't have the energy to run. He just walked away, and that gave us enough time to put another bullet in him.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I mean, you should probably have somebody with you, but I wouldn't sweat it a whole lot.
Yeah, I would agree with you guys. I just, I see it as a little bit of a myth. I mean, obviously a bear can be a dangerous animal, and I mean, it could physically hurt a human, but I don't think of them as dangerous.
I
So,
wouldn't jump on him.
so you talked about you got the bear down, you've come up on your wounded bear, you finished it off, and now you got to get it out of the woods. You've already talked about, both of you, you pretty much said that you don't want to be dragging a bear. There's just too much friction, much worse than dragging a deer, you know, for long distances in particular. And so you pack them out, I don't know, either bone them out or quarter them. But you know, basically, I guess my first question there is, how much weight would you expect? Like, let's just say you shot a 150-pound bear, right? Because you've got a lot more product. You always hear, you know, Clay and those guys at Bear Hunting Magazine talk about, you know, this is the one animal that we use most of. We use the fat typically, we use the meat, we, you know, often take the hide, you know. So if you're going to shoot a 150-pound bear and you're going to pack out, say, the quarters, the hide, uh, um, a lot of the fat, say, for rendering oil or something like that, how much weight can you be expecting to pack out? I'm assuming it's proportionally more than a deer.
It all just comes down to what you're trying to bring out. I never really had any use for the fat. I have carried them out with the fat still on the meat just because I didn't know any better at the time. But I've had packs weigh up to 90 pounds with just the meat. It's not boned out or anything, still had the fat on it. And my partner was carrying the hide and the skull, so it could have very well been more than that. 150-pound bear specifically, I'd say at least 60 pounds minimum.
How about you, Steven? You agree on that, or how much, if you're packing out the fat, what would that add?
Well, so there's a formula. So if you kill a bear and then you field dress it and you take your bear home and weigh it, they say you can add 15 to 20% to it for what you left. So you could do it the other way if you wanted to.
Mhm.
Personally, I'm not going to carry bear fat through the mountains for a mile. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to take the skin, the skull, and the meat, and probably not even the bone. It depends on how big it is. 150-pound bear, if you took the hide, the skull, and the quarters, you're probably looking at 100 pounds or close to it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I had some questions about rendering bear fat, but it sounds like neither of you do much of that. So I'll skip that. And the last question I would ask, and then I'll turn it back to Mark, and he can address any questions in the chat. And we did want to hear you guys tell us an interesting story as well. So, but before we do that, you get it home, and you've got you got some close friends and family coming over. If you could cook one meal using bear meat, what would it be, and how would you describe bear meat as a food generally, maybe compared to some of the other game meat we think about?
I would say the best thing that I've been able to make with burger, comparatively, it's a lot like beef. Like I said, I trim most of the fat out of it. You ask anybody and everybody's going to say bear meat's greasy. It ain't no good. It's actually very good. And, bacon's also greasy. So is beef burgers. There's no reason the grease should ever bother anybody. But it's not as bad as you would think. I'm not very good with a smoker. I've never really got into it. I've had a couple other people that I've given some quarters to. They said that they could make some really good meats with it. Me, I grind everything. I've tried cooking the tenderloins on the grill, not the tenderloins, but the back strap, and I never could get it right. Most of my steaks I usually save for deer, and bear I just grind everything.
How about you, Stephen? How do you cook your bear?
So I'm a terrible cook, but my wife is an outstanding cook. So here's my take on bear meat. I love it, and we eat a lot of it. It's really good, but it has to be clean. You have to get the fat off of it. Bear fat is biologically different than beef fat and pork fat. It's unedible, in my opinion. And once you do that, once you get it clean, you can't mess it up. It's good. You can do with it with whatever you want, and it's gonna be good.
Great. Well, I am gonna turn it back over to Mark, but I will say that bear meat is my favorite meat of any of the wild game meat that I've ever procured. So I love it. It has a bad rap and it shouldn't. So Mark, I'll turn it back to you to take us home.
Sounds good, man. One question that we've had through the chat that's kind of floated around a little bit. You both mentioned about the bears being in the trees during when you might find them in the trees. Might you, or what's the legalities in shooting a bear in a tree? Can you engage a bear when he's up there?
Yeah, it is perfectly legal. As far as doing it with a rifle, it's much easier. You have a little more firepower. If you're hunting with a bow, you're going to have to wait until they get in a perfect position to put your arrow.
Yeah, totally cool shooting bears in trees. If you're bow hunting though, it's a little tougher. You need that double long shot if you can, or broadside. It's a little harder to get if you're shooting up at a bear laying on a limb. That's from experience. It's not a good bow shot.
Very good. Very good. So I think we've answered a lot of the questions that have to do with the specific bear hunting tricks and tactics. What I'd really like to hear from each one of you guys is Stephen, one person just asked if we could hear the story about your biggest trad bow bear. I'm sure the majority of your stories have to do with the trad bow, but if you guys could each share your most memorable or maybe your what you would consider to be your best bear hunting story, maybe your most favorite hunt, even if you didn't get a bear, whatever it might be, but just related to bear hunting. Where would that come in?
Yeah, I can tell that story. I don't know that it'd even be my favorite. I'm proud of all the bears I kill for sure. Any bear to me is a trophy bear. But back in '09, I was hunting on a cornfield. It was a low mass crop year, bears in a cornfield. And I was going to the end of the field early and walked up on this bear. It was in like the second row of corn in that field. I shot it, and it took me all day to recover it. But when I found it, it was big. It weighed 566 pounds.
Wow.
But
So
again,
how did you, it was in the corn. How did you, was it much of a stalk to get in there on it, or how?
I missed it 2 days prior, so I'm just walking edge of this field to get to where I saw it, before, and just walked up right up on it. I mean, I think when I first saw it, it was like 6 yards, and I shot it at 9 yards. And then
Yeah.
I don't know, it didn't dawn on me that it was big till I found it for some reason. I don't know why.
How did you pack that guy out?
Well, so where it was in that cornfield, I drove a tractor right to it. I mean, you couldn't. I don't know. Once it was skinned, its head, or its skull and hide. I don't know. It probably weighed 120 pounds or something. It's just
Wow.
crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. So I've never killed a bear that
Bear.
big in the mountains and had to pack it out. I honestly don't know how you do it. It's a lot of trips, I guess. But I'll shoot the first 76-pound bear that comes by and be proud. I'm not a trophy bear hunter.
Amen.
Amen to that, for real. I agree. All right, Dylan, what would you say is your most memorable bear hunt? Excuse me.
Yeah, that's a tough question. They're all pretty memorable. Each has its own story to it. The most recent one was with a hunting partner. We came to a spot that we found some recent sign, and we went up. There was bear sign all over the place. There's scat. There's claw marks on the trees. Acorns on the ground. Tree branches on the ground. We're creeping. And we come up to a tree probably 50 yards away, very steep incline. And we look up in this tree, and there's bark falling out. You hear sounds, there's acorns just raining out of the tree. And we're both just sitting here side by side, staring in this tree. We can't figure out what it is. We're thinking, what in the world is that? We're looking, so it's got to be a bear. But you'd think if there was a 100-pound animal up in the tree, you'd be able to see it. So we probably spent 15 minutes just kind of walking to the left, walking to the right, just trying to look up in there. And I'll be honest with you, I wrote it off thinking it might be a squirrel. So I start walking away from it. And my buddy Joe, he looks up in the tree. As that bear starts coming down, he said, "Bear." He lets a shot off. I turn around. He said, "There's another one up in the tree." I'm looking up in the top of the tree, and the bear he had shot was already on the ground and running. He was trying to put another round in it. And this whole time, I'm still looking up in the tree. Nothing ever came down. And we figured out that bear, by the time he said, "There's a bear in the tree," and he shot, by the time I turned around, it had already slid down about 40 foot of that tree and hit the ground running.
That's awesome. So they're pretty quick in the trees, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Very cool. That's really neat. So a couple questions that came through in the chat. I'm going to ask two questions. One is in regards to field dressing a bear. What's the difference between field dressing a bear and field dressing a deer, or is there a difference?
There is a difference because by law you have to bring in the cape and the skull to get it tagged. If you're wanting to have it preserved as a rug or getting the hide tanned, you start at the center and then you work from the armpits all the way out to the wrists. As far as just skinning a deer, you're not really trying to protect the hide in any way. Well, I don't anyway. So you just make a cut wherever you need to cut it, flip it over, and hack it up however you need to. The bear, it's you would start from the belly, work up the insides of the arms and the legs, and then up to the throat, and you would pull off basically the joint between their paw and their forearm. You can wedge your knife in there and separate it right at the socket, and then just peel the top half of it off and work it off of the skull, and you can pull it off in one piece that way.
One thing I'd add to what Dylan said, it's a difference that surprises some people, but when you're gutting a bear, Dylan already mentioned grease and how it's a greasy meat. Like everything's very greasy and fatty. Like your hands get coated, and so that's a very noticeable difference when you're butchering or taking apart a bear. And if that's going to bother you for whatever reason, you might want to use gloves or something. But your hands will get very greasy.
Absolutely.
So what would you guys, both of you guys, what would you say is like your biggest tip for a beginner bear hunter? What would you say that they should focus on or do or practice or whatever?
So if, there's an expression, there's exceptions, rules. Well, that is so true of bear hunting. I mean, there's what we talked about, the food sources that we start with and go by. That's a good place to start, but by no means, don't let that be all you're looking at. And it's going to be easily to get discouraged. I can tell you a few cool bear hunting stories, but I got a million of uncool bear hunting stories. It's easy to get discouraged. I mean, the best bear sign I ever saw in my life, I sat there 3 days and never saw a bear. You just got to keep going. It's just time, putting in time and learning the topography and just being in the woods. You're going to figure it out for sure.
What would you say is the biggest mistake beginner bear hunters make?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've made plenty when I started out. I mean, as long as you're out learning, having a good time, I mean, it's successful.
I'd say if you're out in the mountains, the number one thing that always got me was the wind direction. If you're planning a specific route, make sure you know which way the main stream is blowing, your prevailing wind, and then also take into account for your morning and your evening thermals.
So it sounds kind of similar to mountain deer hunting, where you kind of start high and end low. I don't think I think there's kind of like a a partial hibernation, but do the North Georgia bears, do they like specifically hibernate, or do they just kind of slow down when it gets really cold?
Yeah, I
No.
think it's to slow down. There's a term for it. It's a partial hibernation. I don't remember what it's called, but naturally your sows and cubs are gonna probably den up. I don't think the rest of them are gonna den up. They might lay down for a couple weeks or something, but definitely slow when it's cold.
Yeah, and something that would surprise people is, is that a lot of bears in the southern Appalachian region are actually, hibernating or taking these, we'll call them shorter hibernation periods, like you guys are talking about, but like up in trees, like up in like hollowed out trees. People always think about, caves, and they'll do that. They'll hibernate right on the ground. For anybody who's really interested in the science of black bears, if any of you are familiar with using Google Scholar, which is a Google search tool that allows you to find scientific papers on animals, probably the greatest black bear body of work comes from our region, or certainly one of them, and comes from the Great Smokies. And you can find endless numbers of research, papers from the University of Tennessee on, hibernation in this region and feeding and all of that. Not that that doesn't replace experience like folks, like we're hearing from tonight, but it does provide some interesting information to take into the woods and kind of test yourself, at least anecdotally. So yeah, there's a lot of research from the Smokies that's real applicable to what we do here. That's what I'm getting at.
Very cool. I think we've asked all the questions in the chat, and I think we've asked all the questions that we had prior to. Man, Dylan and Steven, I can't thank you guys enough. I've learned a ton from this, and Chris, your knowledge too. I mean, I appreciate that as well, throwing that in. It's just amazing, the difference in everything that you guys have shared. It's really interesting to hear, the two different, very similar styles, but also different aspects. And there's a lot that you guys gave for information. I really appreciate that. I also want to thank everybody that's attended. We're not quite finished yet. I got a couple things to talk about, and then of course we've got the door prizes as well. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, I want to thank Bear Hunting Magazine also. Again, that's going to be the door prizes that are given out. They're going to be coming from them. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was some future events that we've got coming up. Again, I mentioned early in this event that we have the waterfowl film. That's going to be an in-person event. It's going to be happening in Alpharetta at the Cooler, which is an ice rink. And we will be practicing social distancing and all the COVID precautions per the rules, not just of BHA, but the local area as well. But that will be an in-person event. So keep an eye out for that, both on social media and in your emails.
And Mark, that's produced by Project Upland, is that right?
Yes, sir, it is.
Highest quality production. I mean,
yeah, we did. Yeah, we did a Project Upland film earlier about a year ago now, actually, almost to the day, in South Georgia for Project Grouse, which was put on by Project Upland also. And these are high quality films. A lot of really cool information. So I'm expecting that from this waterfowl film too. It's called 2,000 Miles, and it kind of covers some guys coming from the north all the way down, following birds and hunting ducks, which is one of my biggest passions. So I'm really excited about that. We've got some more virtual pint nights that we're going to be putting in the books too. We're going to be doing one on turkey hunting. I think we're going to be doing one on fishing, specifically, I think fly fishing. And we're talking about doing one that has to do with lever guns, which is another thing that I love. And I know Chris over there, he's a mega lever gun lover too. So we've got those events coming up, so keep an eye out for those. I know Chris talked about the Eastern Forest Management Plan, the Okmulgee River Corridor National Park Study, the Boggs Mountain thing. We're going to be staying on top of those. A couple of the hot things that have come out recently in regards to bow hunting, or even just the use of archery equipment in different municipalities. We're staying on top of that too. Those are all issues that our chapter and BHA in general likes to be involved with, whether it's something that we agree on or disagree on. We make it real clear where we stand, and make a real big push to make sure that you guys are looked after in regards to access to public lands, hunting, water, fishing, everything in relation to our what we're after. So just keep an eye out for all those things. I did do a random number generator. I have Stephen Platek, Platek. He's one. I wrote these names down real quick, so I'll be looking to reach out to you guys. But if you could, if I say your name, take a note real quick if you can to send an email. We'll just use the same email for this virtual pint night. I'm going to leave it open. I will be closing this email in about 60 days, but I'm going to leave it open for 60 days. It's bears, BEARS, at bhageorgia.org. And again, that's .org, not .com, bhageorgia.org. So please email. I'll get that email, and if you could send your name and your address, and I will mail you your door prize. So the first one that I had is Stephen Platek. The next name that I have is Brian Morris. And yes, in the chat, that is bears at bhageorgia.org. And the next name that I have is Craig Bangert, Bangert. Excuse me if I butcher your names. I know that there's one that's on here that I typed in that I'm probably going to butcher. Anthony Henderson, I've got you down. Andrew Martin, Nace Naumoski. That's the one that I'm probably butchering. NACE NAUMOSKI. And then the last name that I have is Nathan White. Again, if I said your name, please email me and let me know your name and address. And thank you very much, Nath. And we'll get you your prize. Again, Bear Hunting Magazine shipped me a box of gear, and it has not arrived yet. I think that the weather that kind of happened in Texas kind of slowed down some of the postal things that have been going on. So that's the information as far as the door prizes. Again, I really want to thank everybody for attending. If you're not a member of BHA, I still appreciate you attending. It's a real big plus to have, to be able to get our voice out, to hear from you guys, to hear from Dylan and Steven. I mean, it's a total wealth of knowledge. Again, I thank you guys so much. But if you're not a member, please, 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 please consider joining. It's not very expensive. You get a ton of information. There's a ton of ability to be involved, to participate in the aspects that we have going on in our state, as well as the nation in regards to public lands and water. Again, I want to thank Bear Hunting Magazine, and I really enjoy doing these virtual pint nights. They've been a lot of fun. I am really looking forward to some in-person events, but I do enjoy doing these, and I look forward to doing some more. Chris, do you have anything that you want to add to close out with?
No, I just agree. Everybody should become a member. You should even look into our life membership opportunities are actually relatively affordable, and you get almost all of that value back in some really good merchandise. You know, you could pay $1,500, become a life member, and get a phenomenal hunting rifle, for example, or a shotgun or a Stone Glacier pack. So definitely check out our membership options, get involved. We have opportunities to get involved, actually doing some of the work we need to do in Georgia. And so, I just encourage everybody to work for our public lands. It's important.
For sure, for sure. One last thing, if anybody has any topics that they want to hear about, any questions about BHA or anything like that, any questions about what our chapter is doing, do not hesitate to email me. I am events@bhageorgia.org. You can email me, and I'll pass it on to someone else if it needs to go to their department. But in regards to topics, I'm always up for more topics for these. These are a lot of fun to put together. I'm learning a ton because of it. So, and I'm sure you guys are too. So don't hesitate to reach out, join BHA, and yeah, I hope everybody has a good night. Cheers. Go Atlanta United. But cheers to bear hunting. I know I'm going to be hitting it hard this coming season.
Cheers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thanks, everybody.